The first thing I remember about that morning was the sound. Not music, not voices, but silence. Heavy, pressing silence, broken only by the shuffle of shoes on the old church floor. I sat there, hands clenched tight around the program until the edges cut into my skin. My Uncle Daniel's name was printed in bold at the top, and below it, dates that marked the start and the end of his life. Seeing them together on one line made it real in a way nothing else had. The smell was overwhelming, lilies mixed with polished wood and a faint trace of candle wax. I tried to breathe steady, but the air felt too thick. My chest rose and fell too fast, like I was drowning in that silence. Daniel's casket was at the front, gleaming under the dim light that poured through stained glass. Red and blue patterns danced across the surface, almost mocking in their beauty. People whispered behind me, snippets of sympathy, fragments of gossip. I didn't want to hear any of it, because for me, Daniel wasn't just my uncle, he was everything. He was the man who had picked me up from the ashes of my own family, who stepped in when no one else did. 15 years of showing up, protecting, teaching, and now I was saying goodbye. But that wasn't what shook me the most. It was the sound of doors creaking open behind me. I felt Noah's shoulder stiffen beside mine before I even turned. And when I did, my whole body went cold. They were there, my parents, Mark and Linda, the people who had abandoned me when I was 13, the ones who decided that raising 2 kids was too heavy a burden and left us in the hands of strangers. 15 years. 15 years of silence. 15 years where they never called, never wrote, never asked. And now they appeared at Daniel's funeral. Their clothes were sharp, deliberate. My mother in a black dress that looked borrowed from a catalog. My father in a suit that fit too well for someone who hadn't been around. Their faces were masks, lips pressed into thin lines, eyes glistening in a performance of grief. And here's the question I can't shake. Have you ever seen someone walk into your life only when there's something to gain? Because that's exactly what it felt like. My stomach twisted. My hands went cold even as my face burned. I heard the slam of a door from the past echoing in my head. I saw my younger self, standing in a hallway with a trash bag full of clothes, crying until Daniel wrapped his arms around me. That flash of memory hit like lightning, then disappeared. And yet here they were, walking down the aisle like they belonged. Like the years in between had never happened. Like betrayal could be erased with one appearance at a funeral. The people around us shifted, uncomfortable. Some recognized them, some didn't. But I knew why they were here. It wasn't for Daniel. It wasn't for me or Noah. It was for money, for inheritance. For the life they thought they could snatch back just by standing in the right place at the right time. I wanted to scream, to demand why, to ask how they dared to show up now. But my voice stuck in my throat, strangled by shock and fury. And maybe you're wondering, what would you do if the people who abandoned you suddenly showed up when the will was about to be read? Would you confront them? Would you walk out? Or would you sit there, like I did, frozen between rage and disbelief? I remember every detail of that moment. The click of my mother's heels, the way my father's eyes scanned the room, pretending to search for Daniel's casket when I knew he was calculating something else entirely. Noah leaned closer and whispered, "Stay calm." But his jaw was tight, his fists clenched. I stared straight ahead, trying to ignore the heat rising in my face, the pounding in my ears. But it didn't matter. The damage was already done, because in that instant, the funeral was no longer about Daniel, it was about them. About the ghosts of my past suddenly becoming flesh and blood again, about the storm they were dragging into a place meant for peace. And deep down I knew this was only the beginning. If you've ever seen someone come back into your life only when there's something to take, you know exactly how that feels. And if you haven't, keep listening, because this story, my story, is far from over. I was 13 when my world split in two. 1 minute, I was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. The next, my parents were yelling in the other room. Their voices were sharp, jagged, bouncing off the thin apartment walls. I remember holding my little brother's hand under the table, his small fingers trembling against mine. And then the slam of the front door. That sound never left me. It was final, like a nail in wood. They didn't come back. For days I kept hoping. I sat on the windowsill, waiting to see their faces in the crowd below. Maybe they'd change their minds. Maybe they'd remember we were just kids, but no one came. The fridge got emptier, the nights got colder, and eventually strangers showed up, social workers, papers, questions. Noah crying in his sleep, asking, "Where's Mom? Where's Dad?" Do you know how it feels to answer that question when you're just a kid yourself? I didn't have words. All I could do was hold him tighter. The system was supposed to take care of us, but have you ever walked into a foster home carrying your whole life in a plastic bag? The smell of bleach, the sound of other kids sizing you up, the sense that you're temporary, that you don't belong anywhere. That was our reality. I bounced from one house to another. Some families were kind, most were indifferent. One family locked the fridge at night, said food wasn't free. Another treated me like unpaid help, handing me chores while their own kids watched TV. Every night I counted the days, whispering promises to Noah. It won't always be like this. I'll protect you. I'll keep us together. But even that promise broke. The day they split us up is burned into me. A woman with clipped words told me Noah was being placed with a different family better suited for his age. I screamed. I begged. I clung to his tiny backpack until they pulled me off. He looked at me through the car window, eyes red, face pressed against the glass. That was the last time I saw him for months. I can still hear his voice muffled, calling my name, and I can still feel the hollow silence after the car drove away. It's strange how quickly you learn to stop crying. Tears don't change anything. I swallowed every sob, carried them like stones in my chest, because I thought if I stayed strong enough, maybe life wouldn't crush me. Flash forward to nights spent lying awake on a stranger's couch, staring at a ceiling I didn't recognize, wondering, why us? Why weren't we enough? And maybe you're wondering the same. How does a kid survive that kind of abandonment? The truth is, I don't know how I did. Maybe luck, maybe stubbornness, maybe both. But here's the thing. Those years carved me. Every locked fridge, every goodbye, every unanswered question, it all turned into armor. By the time Daniel came into the picture, I was raw, bruised, but still standing. And that's why what happened at the funeral shook me so deeply. Because when you've spent years being left behind, when you've built a new life out of the ruins, seeing the people who abandoned you suddenly walk back in, it cuts open wounds you thought had scarred over. So if you've ever felt discarded, like you didn't matter, hear me when I say this. You're not alone. I lived it. And that pain became the soil where something stronger eventually grew. When Daniel came into my life, I didn't trust him at first. How could I? By then, every adult had either left, lied, or looked the other way. I was 15, carrying bruises you couldn't see, the kind that live under your skin. Noah was younger, still clinging to hope, still asking questions I couldn't answer. Daniel showed up in the middle of that chaos, this tall man with a steady voice and eyes that didn't dart away when I looked at him. He wasn't flashy, wasn't trying to charm. He just stood there calm and said, "You two deserve better. Come with me." And we did. The first night in his house was surreal. A real bed, sheets that smelled like detergent, not mildew. Dinner that wasn't a microwaved tray, but roasted chicken, vegetables, bread still warm. I remember sitting at the table, fork frozen in midair, waiting for someone to tell me not to eat too much, Daniel noticed. He just smiled and said, There's more in the kitchen. Help yourself. Do you know how shocking it is when someone offers you abundance after years of scarcity? My throat tightened. That's when I realized this man wasn't here out of pity. He was here because he'd already decided. We were his family. Over time, he became more than a guardian. He became a mentor. He pushed me toward books about business, not just schoolwork. He'd sit across from me with spreadsheets, teaching me how numbers told stories, how money could be grown, protected, shared. I didn't even know people could talk about money that way, like it wasn't just survival, but possibility. With Noah, he did something different. Daniel noticed the way Noah sketched in the margins of his notebooks, the way he lit up around color. So he bought him paints, brushes, canvases. He'd take Noah to galleries on weekends, letting him stand in front of pieces until his eyes glowed. It was like Daniel had this gift. He saw what we needed, what we could become, and then he gave us the tools. Not handouts, tools, choices. One night, years later, I was up late with him, struggling over a business plan draft. My frustration boiled over and I snapped, "Why are you doing this?" "Why us?" He leaned back, hands folded, and said words I'll never forget. "Family isn't blood, it's choice." That line cut through me, because no one had ever chosen me before. Not really. And here was this man, not bound by obligation, not chained by guilt, choosing us every single day. Maybe you've had someone like that. Someone who saw you drowning and didn't just throw a rope, but pulled you out, taught you to swim. Or maybe you haven't, and you're still waiting. If so, I need you to hear me. One person choosing you can change everything. With Daniel, I learned to dream without feeling guilty. Noah learned to create without apology. We had structure, hope, purpose. The nights of empty fridges and locked doors faded into memory, replaced by new routines. Family dinners, weekend projects, quiet talks on the porch. I don't romanticize it. It wasn't perfect. We fought. I tested him, pushed him away sometimes, half expecting he'd eventually do what everyone else did, leave. But he never did. And that's what built the foundation for everything that came later. Daniel's decision to step in, to choose us, wasn't just about saving 2 abandoned kids. It was about rewriting our story. If you've ever doubted whether one choice can shift an entire life, let this be proof. His choice became our chance. And it's because of that choice that the day of his will reading became the battlefield it did. But we'll get there. I walked into the lawyer's office that morning with my stomach twisted into knots. The air smelled of leather and paper, heavy with something unspoken. Noah sat beside me, silent, his hands clenched tight around a pen he kept clicking. Every sound echoed in that room, tick of the clock, shuffle of papers, the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting to explode. And then they arrived. My parents, the ones who had walked away 15 years earlier, they strolled in like they belonged there. Like the years of absence could be erased by a single performance of grief. My chest tightened. I swear the room got colder. They didn't look at me at first, only at the lawyer, only at the folders on his desk. As if we were ghosts, but the money. Oh, the money was real. The lawyer cleared his throat. "We're here to read the last will and testament of Daniel Hayes." My heart ached at hearing his name like that. Final, stamped on a document, but I sat tall. I knew Daniel's decision wasn't just about assets. It was about truth. He read line after line. Noah and I were named. So was the foundation Daniel wanted us to carry on. Then came the part everyone was waiting for. My parents' names. The lawyer paused, looked up over his glasses, read slowly, each word like a nail in the coffin of their expectations. "To my estranged brother and sister-in-law, I leave $1. May it serve as a reminder that greed earns you nothing." The air cracked open. My mother gasped. My father's face turned red, his fists slamming the table. $1. That's all they got after waiting, after showing up, after pretending. And then, before they could even spit their outrage, the door swung open. 2 men in dark suits, badges flashed. The letters FBI cut the room like a blade. My parents froze. One of the agents said calmly, "You're under arrest. Fraud, embezzlement. Years in the making." I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. All those years of silence, of abandonment, of watching them chase everything but us. It collapsed in that moment. My father shouted. My mother begged. But the handcuffs clicked shut. Do you know that sound? Metal on bone. Final. I thought it would bring me pain. Instead, it brought something sharper, Justice. The room spun with voices, agents, lawyers, my parents protesting. But inside me there was stillness. For the first time, I wasn't the powerless child they left behind. I was the daughter chosen by someone who believed I was worth more than blood. Noah squeezed my hand. His eyes weren't angry, they weren't scared, they were steady. He whispered, "Daniel knew." And he was right. Daniel had known. He'd written his will not just as a legal document, but as a message. To us, to them, to anyone watching. So, what do you do when the people who gave you life get exposed for who they really are? When the past you feared collides with the justice you didn't think you'd see? I'll tell you what you do. You hold your head high. You carry forward the legacy of the one who chose you. And you never, ever let greed rewrite your story. Because Daniel's story wasn't over. And neither was mine. The silence after the will reading stayed with me for days. It was heavy, like fog you can't walk through. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that metallic click of the handcuffs, saw the look on my mother's face, the way my father shouted as the FBI dragged him out. You'd think that moment would be the end of it? But endings are never that clean, are they? I tried to focus on what came next, on honoring Daniel. He hadn't left us just money. He'd left us a vision. So I made a decision. I called the lawyer, the board, anyone who would listen, and I announced it. I was starting the Daniel Hayes Foundation, a charity that would carry forward everything he believed in: second chances, dignity, choice. The day we launched, the room was packed. People Daniel had mentored, people he'd helped when no one else would. I stood at the podium, Noah at my side. Though quieter than usual, cameras flashed. My voice shook at first, but then I remembered Daniel's words. Family isn't blood. It's choice. And I told everyone there that this foundation wasn't just about money. It was about choosing to stand for something bigger than ourselves. The applause was loud, but I noticed Noah didn't clap right away. His hands stayed folded in his lap. His smile looked polite, not proud, and for a second I felt it, that tiny gap between us. Later that night I asked him if he was okay. He just said, "Yeah, I'm fine, just tired." But I heard the distance in his voice. I saw the way his eyes darted away from mine. Have you ever celebrated a victory and still felt uneasy? Like the ground beneath you might crack, even while people cheer? That's what it was like. I thought the storm had passed, that my parents' arrest and Daniel's will had sealed everything shut. I thought I could finally breathe. But here's the thing about closure. It's rarely final. Sometimes it's just the calm before the next wave. I looked at Noah, standing across the room, shadowed by his own thoughts, and I felt it deep in my chest. This wasn't the end. I thought that was the end, but it wasn't. I wish I could tell you that starting the foundation tied everything neatly together, that Noah and I stood side by side, perfectly aligned, carrying Daniel's legacy without a crack in sight. But the truth? It didn't take long for the gap between us to stretch wider. It started small, missed calls, meetings where he showed up late or not at all. At first, I thought it was grief. We all handle loss differently, right? But one night, I walked into the living room and found him sketching on huge sheets of paper, surrounded by paint, clay, and business brochures. His eyes lit up when he talked about opening his own gallery, a space for young artists to be discovered. "Sarah, this is what I've always wanted," he said, his hands moving wildly as he spoke. "A place that's mine, not Daniel's, not yours, mine." I froze. Not because I didn't believe in him, but because I realized his dream was pulling him in the opposite direction. I tried to smile, but the words slipped out sharper than I intended. "And what about the foundation?" Daniel's name? His legacy? Noah's jaw tightened. "You think everything has to orbit around you, around your vision? But Daniel raised me too, Sarah. He taught me to create, not to sit in boardrooms. Have you ever heard someone you love turn their words into weapons? Short, sharp, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. That's what it felt like." I snapped back, louder than I should have. "Don't you dare twist this. I've been fighting to protect what he built while you're off chasing fantasies." His chair screeched across the floor as he stood, his face flushed, his voice low but shaking. "At least my fantasy is mine, not a prison dressed up as charity." The silence after that was brutal. Not the kind of silence that heals, but the kind that hammers the distance between two people. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, hearing his words replay in my head. "Not yours, mine." And I wondered, was I holding too tightly? Was my need to honor Daniel strangling Noah's chance to be his own man? But then I pictured Daniel's smile, the way he'd place a hand on both our shoulders and remind us that family meant choosing each other, and I couldn't shake the fear that Noah was choosing something else. Have you ever been more afraid of losing the living than you were of mourning the dead? That's what it felt like. I thought losing my parents once was enough. But the idea of losing Noah now, that was a wound I wasn't sure I could survive. I thought the fight between Noah and me was something we could keep behind closed doors. Family arguments belong at the dinner table, not the headlines. But I was wrong. It started with a phone call from a friend. "Sarah, have you seen this?" Her voice was shaky, urgent. I hadn't. But when I clicked the link she sent, my stomach dropped. Bold black letters flashed across the screen. Charity Princess Verses. Artist brother. Daniel's heirs at war. The article painted me as cold, controlling, obsessed with power. It painted Noah as the tortured artist, suffocated by a sister who couldn't let go. Half of it was lies. The other half was twisted truths. And the worst part? They had pictures. Candid shots of me walking into the foundation building, jaw tight, papers clutched to my chest. Another of Noah leaving a cafe, head down, a storm on his face. Out of context, we looked like enemies. Have you ever felt the world decide who you are without even asking you? That's what it felt like. More headlines followed. The cracks in Daniel's legacy. Money or morals? The battle of the siblings. Some even hinted at scandal. What is Sarah hiding? The press didn't just report, they fed on us. Every word Noah and I spoke became ammunition. Every silence became a headline. I tried to call him, he didn't answer. When he finally texted back, it was short. "See what you've done?" My chest burned reading those words, because I hadn't done it. But the media made it look like I had. They made it look like I was pushing him out, forcing him into a corner. TV shows ran segments. Social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag Team Noah. Hashtag Team Sarah. People I'd never met picked sides in a war I hadn't even wanted. The pressure was suffocating. Donors began asking questions. Supporters of the foundation wanted reassurance. And deep down, a voice whispered, "What if they're right? What if you are controlling?" One night, I sat alone in the office scrolling through the endless stream of articles. The glow of the screen lit up the dark room. I stopped at one headline that chilled me. Daniel's empire doomed to collapse. Unless the siblings unite, unite. The word felt heavy, impossible. How could we unite when Noah and I couldn't even speak without breaking each other open? But then another thought pushed its way in. Maybe the press wasn't just reporting. Maybe someone was feeding them. Who would benefit from painting us as fractured? Who would gain from seeing Daniel's empire torn apart? The seed of suspicion was planted that night. And if you've ever had the feeling that strangers knew more about your life than you did, you know exactly how dangerous that seed can become. The first time I saw him, I knew he wasn't just another investor. He had that look, tailored suit, polished shoes, smile too smooth to be trusted. He introduced himself as Mr. Graves, though something about the name felt like a mask. He came straight to Noah, not me. And that already told me everything. They met at a gallery downtown. I tagged along, though Noah wasn't thrilled. Graves praised Noah's work like it was gold. "Your art has edge. It has soul," he said, running his hand over a canvas like he owned it already. Noah lit up. He hadn't heard words like that in weeks. Then Graves leaned in. "I want to fund you." "Not just fund you. Launch you. Big shows, international exposure. But there's a condition." The air shifted. I knew before he even said it that the condition had something to do with me. He smiled that thin smile. "The foundation. It's distracting. It ties you both to Daniel's shadow. If Sarah steps away, dissolves it. I'll sign the check tomorrow." My chest went cold. I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You're saying his career depends on me shutting down the very thing Daniel died building?" Graves didn't flinch. "I'm saying legacy is one thing, but opportunity is rare. Don't you think Daniel would want Noah to fly? The way he said Daniel's name, it was too casual, too rehearsed." Noah's jaw clenched. He didn't look at me. He just stared at his shoes. I wanted to scream at him to say no, but his silence said enough. Walking out of that gallery, my head spun. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. It wasn't just the offer. It was the way Graves had studied me. Like I was another number in his ledger. And one question wouldn't leave me alone. What if this man was connected to our parents? Because think about it. Who else would want the foundation gone? Who else would benefit from splitting us apart, from rewriting Daniel's legacy as a footnote? That night, Noah and I fought. "You don't get it," he shouted. "This is my shot, my only shot." "And what about Daniel's shot?" I fired back. "What about the people who need this foundation? Do they just not matter?" His eyes burned. Maybe I'm tired of carrying Daniel's ghost. Maybe I want to live my life without you telling me who I'm supposed to be. That cut deeper than he knew. I slammed the door on my way out, but the truth followed me. This wasn't just a family argument anymore. This was a game someone else was playing. And Noah, without even realizing, was being used as the pawn. So I asked myself, and maybe you've asked this too, what's more dangerous, greed from strangers or desperation from the ones you love? Because Graves had put us both in check. And if I didn't figure out his endgame soon, Noah and I would lose everything Daniel fought for. I couldn't let it go. That smirk on Graves's face, the way he dropped Daniel's name like he owned it, it haunted me. So I started digging. At first, it was small things. I looked into his company filings, public records, business ties. Most of it looked clean, too clean, like it had been polished for anyone who might be curious. But I've learned this. When something looks spotless, it usually means there's dirt hidden somewhere deeper. I called in a favor from an old friend of Daniel's, someone who used to work in compliance. Within hours, she sent me a thin folder. "Be careful," she warned. "This guy doesn't just make deals. He makes people disappear from the paperwork." I spread the papers across my desk. At first, just numbers, subsidiaries, shell corporations. And then, a name buried 3 layers deep. A company once managed by my parents. My throat went dry. It couldn't be a coincidence. Graves wasn't just circling Noah for his art. He was circling us. That night, I confronted Noah. "He's tied to them," I said, dropping the folder on the table. "Look, it's all here." Noah barely glanced at it. "So what if he is?" "That doesn't mean—" "It means everything," I cut him off. "Don't you see? This isn't about your career. This is about destroying Daniel's legacy, about erasing what he gave us." Noah's face tightened, but I saw the crack in his armor. He was scared. He just didn't want to admit it. I didn't sleep. I kept hearing echoes of my parents' voices, sharp and cold. "You're useless without us." The flashbacks came uninvited. My mother's nails tapping the glass table, my father's laughter after shutting the door in my face. And now, here they were again, not in person, but through a man who wore their fingerprints like invisible ink. The next day, I followed Graves. I know, it sounds reckless, but sometimes you don't uncover the truth by waiting. It only shows itself when you chase it. He left a hotel downtown, walked briskly to a black car. He wasn't alone, and when the door opened, I froze. Inside, my father. Not in prison clothes, not broken smiling, like he'd been waiting for me to find him all along. I ducked back before Graves could see me, my heart slamming against my ribs. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my phone. I recorded what I could, blurry footage through tinted glass, but it was enough. They weren't gone. They weren't finished. They were moving pieces again, trying to pull Noah to their side, trying to turn me into the obstacle that had to be removed. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run straight to Noah and force him to see what I'd seen. But part of me hesitated. Would he believe me? Or would he think I was making it up, just to protect the foundation? That's when the real terror hit me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was war, a family war. And Graves was just the soldier they'd sent ahead. So I'll ask you this. What would you do if the very people who abandoned you came back? Not to reconcile, not to apologize, but to take everything from you again. Because in that moment, standing on the sidewalk with proof in my hand, I realized this wasn't Daniel's fight anymore. It was mine. And if I didn't step up, we'd lose Noah. And everything Daniel built would die with him. I didn't run to Noah right away. I sat with the footage, with the folder, with the weight of knowing my parents weren't just shadows from the past, they were still moving pieces on the board. But there was no way to fight this alone. Daniel didn't raise me to fight alone, so I called Noah. My voice shook when I told him to meet me at Daniel's old office. That place still smelled faintly of his cigars, the leather of his chairs, the books he underlined with thick black ink. It felt like Daniel was there, watching, waiting to see what we'd do next. When Noah walked in, he looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped. He'd been torn in half, I could see it. I didn't waste time. I pressed play on my phone. The blurry video filled the silence. Graves opening the car door. My father inside smiling. Noah swore under his breath. He staggered back like he'd been punched. That's impossible. He's supposed to be behind bars, I finished for him. Yeah, I thought so too. But he's not. They're out. And they're using Graves to get to you. For a long time, Noah just stared at me. I thought he'd deny it. Thought he'd cling to whatever hope he'd built around his art and this so-called investor. But then his jaw clenched and his voice broke. I should have listened to you. Something shifted in that moment. All the noise between us, the fights, the anger, the distance, it cracked and fell away. What was left was 2 kids who had survived abandonment, who had been given a second life by a man who chose us when no one else did. We stood there in silence, both of us remembering Daniel in our own ways, his hand on my shoulder the day he told me I wasn't broken. his laugh when Noah showed him his first painting, his voice saying, "Family isn't blood, it's choice." And that was the answer. We called a press conference. Not because we wanted attention, but because silence was no longer an option. The world had been watching us anyway, speculating, spinning stories. It was time to tell our own. Standing behind the podium, I felt the weight of every eye on me. But for once, I wasn't afraid. I looked at Noah by my side, and I spoke the truth. Our Uncle Daniel gave us a home when no one else would. He gave us his trust, his love, his name, and we will not let anyone, past or present, tear apart what he built. This foundation stays. His legacy stays, because family is not about blood. Family is about choice. Noah stepped forward then, his voice steady, his words simple. And my choice is clear. Every profit from my company, every single year, a portion goes directly to the foundation. Daniel believed in art and giving. Now both will stand together. The room erupted with questions, flashes, chaos. But I didn't care. In that chaos, I felt peace. We weren't hiding anymore. We weren't fractured. We were standing side by side, exactly where Daniel would have wanted us. And as I walked away from the podium, I realized something. The fight wasn't about inheritance or revenge. It was about proving that the love we chose was stronger than the greed we were born into. So let me ask you, if you've ever seen greed tear families apart, don't keep this story to yourself. Share it. Because someone out there needs to hear that blood doesn't define you, love does. Choice does. And sometimes the family you build is the truest family you'll ever have. I found the notebooks by accident. They were in a banker's box at the back of Daniel's old office, under a stack of invoices and a chipped model airplane he never finished. The leather was worn soft at the corners, the pages fanned from years of flipping. I sat on the floor, legs crossed like a kid, and opened to the first page. In Daniel's blocky handwriting, "If you want to build anything that lasts, start with people, not numbers. You think you know someone because you lived in their house, ate their food, held their hand when the pain spiked." I thought I knew Daniel, but the notebooks told me about the years he never discussed. The ones before us. The ones that made him the man who chose us. He grew up in a factory town, one of those places where the smokestacks look permanent and the nights smell like oil. His father ran a small repair shop. "A life measured in bolts," Daniel wrote. The plan was simple: inherit the shop, marry the girl next door, never leave, but he left anyway. Queens first, then Manhattan. Night classes, cheap coffee, too many rejections to count. He got his first job in a computer lab because he knew how to fix a jammed printer faster than the IT guy. There are receipts folded into the margins, bus tickets, a diner tab for $4.19, a photograph of a studio apartment with peeling paint. On one page, he taped a Metro card with the note, "The day I decided I could stand being nobody a little longer if it meant I had a chance to become somebody for real." Do you know that feeling? That mixture of fear and freedom when you don't belong where you came from, but you haven't arrived where you're going? He wrote about a woman he almost married. She loved the shine, not the light. It ended the night he realized she spoke about our future, the way brokers talk about assets. He went home alone, cooked eggs at midnight, and underlined a sentence 3 times. A family is not a portfolio. The early company stories are messy, human. A product launch that flopped. A server failure that fried 2 years of work. Daniel didn't stop. He slept on the office couch and started again. He hired people who needed a first break because he remembered the taste of his own. There's a note about an intern who lived in a shelter. Daniel slipped a key to a studio across town and wrote, "Pay me back with a degree." She did. There's a line about a junior engineer who sent remittances home. Daniel doubled his salary and told him to keep quiet about it because help is better when it doesn't humiliate. And then I turned a page and felt my ribs tighten. Mark and Linda. My parents' names underlined. They approached me at a charity gala, Daniel wrote. Charming, brittle. They wanted in on the next round. I said no. 2 months later, rumors about me buying a judge, anonymous emails, a price on silence. He doesn't rant, he documents, dates, sums, bank routes through a shell company with a name I would later see again, one that buried Graves's trail 3 layers deep. Daniel didn't pay them. He did something quieter. He sent everything to a lawyer he trusted and created a sealed file. In the margin he scribbled, "If they come for the kids, open this." The notebooks jump years sometimes, like the city does when you blink. Winter to summer, failure to miracle. He writes about walking the Queensboro Bridge at dawn when the company finally went profitable. I counted trucks instead of blessings because numbers calmed me. He writes about the first time he felt like a father. It wasn't a birthday or a graduation, it was a Tuesday. He taught a teenager to make an omelet without burning the pan. He watched the eggs set like it meant we might make it, Daniel wrote. I didn't know it then, but he meant Noah. There's an entry that knocked the breath out of me, a single paragraph. Met 2 kids at a diner today. She sat tall, though her shoulders shook. He tried to smile at the waitress, but his eyes kept searching the door. I told them I could buy them lunch. They said no. They ordered water and split a grilled cheese. I offered a ride. They hesitated. When I said, "You're safe with me," she believed me, and I realized I had to make that sentence true every day after. I could see it. The cracked vinyl booth. The straw wrapper crinkled tight between my fingers. The way Noah pretended not to be hungry. Daniel must have left the receipt on purpose, $8.52. Next to it, he wrote the date that became our 2nd birthday. Do you ever find proof that your life wasn't an accident? That's what those notebooks were. Evidence of intention, of design, of choices made long before the world noticed. He didn't just teach me P&L statements or how to negotiate. He taught me how to recognize a door when it opened and how to build one when it didn't. There's a page titled Education of Sarah, bullet points in Daniel's neat, stubborn script. Profit is oxygen, not the point. Give without receipts. Hire for hunger. Train for skill. Keep a red file for the day the past returns. The red file. My hand shook remembering the day it did exactly what he intended. Blew open a courtroom silence and handed my parents to the handcuffs they earned. He had prepared for the storm years before the clouds formed. Not because he was paranoid, because he was a builder, and builders design for weight. Toward the end, the entries thin out, hospitals, chemo schedules, scribbles at 3 a.m., where the ink falters, and then a page I can barely write about without my throat closing. If there's pain, let it be because we loved hard. If there's money left, make it move. Underneath, a line he must have practiced saying aloud to himself until it sounded easy. Family isn't blood, it's choice. People love to mythologize success. They make it sound like a clean staircase, like he knew where he was going the whole time. The notebooks argue otherwise. He wasn't a prophet. He was a man who refused to stop choosing. He chose to leave the town that would have kept him small. He chose to lose a love rather than become someone he despised. He chose to build a company that made room for people who weren't born with keys in their pockets. He chose us. When I finished reading, dusk had soaked the windows purple. The city hummed below like a machine tuned to a heartbeat. I packed the notebooks back into the box and sat there on the carpet with my palms pressed to my eyes, letting the ache come and go. Then I pulled one journal free again and wrote my own line on the last blank page. We'll keep choosing. If you've ever wondered whether your past disqualifies you from building something worthy, listen. The man who saved us wasn't perfect. He failed publicly. He doubted privately. He kept moving anyway. And because he kept moving, 2 abandoned kids learned to stand. So here's my ask. Soft and simple. If someone chose you when they didn't have to, tell someone about it. Share this story with the one friend who needs proof that family can be built, not just inherited. And if no one has chosen you yet, don't count yourself out. You can be the first chooser. You can start the line. I used to think the worst thing I ever did was leave. That's what people like to hear. A clean confession, one bad act you can tuck into a headline and read over breakfast. But the truth is uglier. Leaving wasn't a single moment. It was 100 small choices I told myself I'd undo tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. The apartment was too small, the rent past due, the arguments loud enough to curdle milk. Mark talked about big plans with a voice that made me want to believe. I wanted to be the kind of woman who believed. He said he had a friend with a sure investment. "Just a little seed money," he said. "We'll triple it in a month." When it disappeared, he said it was bad timing. When the second one disappeared, he said we needed real capital to make it, not small bets. Do you see how it happens? How the water warms slow? I told myself I was protecting the kids from the worst of it. When we started locking the fridge at night, God, I still hear the click. I called it discipline. When I took a second job and came home so tired that Sarah's voice grated on my nerves like sandpaper, I told myself I was teaching her to be tough. When Mark shouted, I folded laundry. When he laughed at her questions, I told myself he was just under pressure. The day we left wasn't planned. He said we were going for a drive to clear our heads. We ended up at his sister's house, a woman who looked at me like I was one more mistake he'd made, and at the kids like they were stains on the carpet. "Just for a night," he said, "just until we sort things out." I packed a small bag and put on lipstick because I thought looking strong would make it so. Sarah stood in the doorway, arms crossed. That stubborn chin lifted the way it always did when she felt a storm coming. Noah reached for me. I told him to be brave. He was, I wasn't. People think monsters look like monsters, that they come with fangs. I looked like a mother. I said mother things in a mother voice. I said, "I'll be right back." I wasn't. The years after are a blur of cheap motels and new names for old hustles. Mark always had a plan. He always had a man. When he talked about Daniel, it wasn't as the uncle who took our children in. It was as a Mark we should have been smart enough to keep close. "He's soft," Mark said. "He helps people. That's leverage." I said nothing. Silence is a collaboration. You want the part where I say I tried to leave, don't you? I did. Twice. Once I made it to a bus station with a bag of clothes and a paperback. I watched a woman kiss her toddler and board a coach to somewhere with mountains on the poster. I went home instead. Mark had a way of turning the world so I couldn't see myself in it without him. He told me I was too soft for the world and too hard for the kids. He told me Daniel made me look like an amateur. I believed him when I was tired, and I was always tired. When the FBI came, I cried convincingly because I'd been practicing for years. I cried for the cameras. I cried for myself. I did not cry for the children I left because I had taught myself not to picture their faces when I wanted to sleep. Do you know what living with that costs? Interest accrues. It compounds in the dark. In holding rooms and corridors, names change hands. That's where I met Graves, not in a movie way, in a fluorescent lit way. He was polite. He spoke softly. He said words like reputation management and strategic alliances. He never mentioned my children. That was his elegance. He didn't need to. He mentioned Daniel's foundation. He called it a public relations lever. I nodded like I understood. I did. It could be pulled. "You'll get what you're owed," he told Mark. He told me nothing. My part was small. Silence, as usual. Stay quiet. Let the headlines do their work. Mothers are better villains on screen than on paper. The story would write itself. Ambitious girl, controlling foundation, boy wonder artist starving under her heel. People love stories where the woman who stood tall is punished for being tall. I watched it unfold like weather. I told myself fate had a sense of humor. Then I saw the footage. My husband in a car with Graves smiling. And I felt, what was it? Not shock, recognition. Of course he was smiling. The game was fun for him again. I thought of Sarah's chin, Noah's fingers on the table, the night I clicked the fridge lock with a lecture ready about budgets and responsibility, a lock that wasn't about money at all, it was about power. I thought of Daniel, a man I barely knew, who loved my children like I never learned to. I won't ask you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself. I tell you this because stories like ours always flatten the mother into a single line. Monster, coward, ghost. I was all three, but I was also a human being who let fear make her cheap. I let a man teach me that greed was protection and that softness was weakness. I wore that lesson like a second skin until it cracked. If I could go back to the doorway where Sarah stood with her arms crossed, I'd say different words. I'd say, I'm scared and I'm wrong. You deserve better than the person I am today. I'd still have to become the person who could make that true. I don't know if I would have. That's the worst part. So here is my confession, unclean and unpretty. I left long before the day I walked out. I left when I stopped listening to my children. I left when I mistook Mark's confidence for safety. I left when my silence outlasted my shame. If you're listening because you love a headline, take this one instead. Choice is daily. You can choose your children even after you've failed them. It won't erase the failing. It's just the only honest starting point. Don't share this to redeem me. Share it if you know someone standing at a doorway with a bag half packed, telling herself she'll be right back. Tell her to stay. Tell her to choose before the interest compounds. It's past midnight and the city is soft for once. Sirens far away, the radiator ticking like an old metronome. I left the window cracked because the air smells like rain. The press conference ended hours ago. People messaged congratulations. Donors called us brave. Noah fell asleep on the couch, one arm thrown over his eyes like a boy who's run too hard and finally stopped. I could wake him and tell him to go to bed. I don't. I want to memorize this. The quiet after a storm we didn't think we'd survive. I made tea. I didn't drink it. The cup's gone lukewarm on the desk. Daniel's notebooks sit in a neat stack beside my laptop. Somewhere, a neighbor is practicing scales on a piano, same melody over and over until it gets clean. I open a fresh page and decide to write 3 letters. To my younger self, to Noah, to Daniel. Maybe that's sentimental. That's fine. Sentiment kept me alive when logic said I shouldn't be. Dear 13-year-old me, you are not a problem to be fixed. You're a person who deserved better than you got. I know your chest hurts like it's been emptied with a spoon. I know you're tired of being brave in rooms where nobody says thank you. I wish I could step through the years and sit on the floor with you in that echoing apartment, share a bag of chips, and tell you that the locked fridge wasn't your fault, that the scolding wasn't wisdom, and that the night you whispered to Noah that you'd keep him safe, you were already doing the impossible. You will build a life where dinner is loud and seconds are normal. You will learn to sleep without listening for footsteps. You'll fail, then learn to rebuild without apologizing for needing help. People will call you strong like it's a medal, and sometimes it will feel like a burden. You're allowed to be soft. You're allowed to become someone your past never predicted. One more thing. You don't have to save everyone to deserve to be saved. When Daniel offers you a ride, take it. When kindness scares you because it looks like a trap, try anyway. Trust can be relearned, dear Noah. Tonight, when you spoke into a dozen microphones and promised to give a portion of your profits to the foundation, I watched your hands. They didn't shake. You've always created with your whole body, shoulders, jaw, breath. When you're painting, you forget to eat. When you're angry, you forget to listen. When you're scared, you pretend you're only tired. I see you. I'm sorry for the ways I tried to turn my fear into your schedule. I'm sorry for making legacy sound like a cage. Daniel loved your art not because it made sense as an investment, but because it made you alive. If your gallery opens in a storefront that smells like sawdust and hope, I'll be there with flowers and a toolkit. If you fail, we'll sweep the floor and start again. If you succeed beyond everything we expected, promise me this. Keep a stool in the corner for the kid who wanders in with paint on his sleeves and nowhere to belong. Seat him, feed him, hand him a brush. There's one more stool, too. The one with your name on it at the foundation. You don't owe it rent. It's just there when you want it. Come sit, plan a workshop. Hang art in the waiting room so the intake forms don't feel like winter. Bring loud music and stubborn joy. We can be different kinds of necessary, dear Daniel. You would have hated the podiums and the flashbulbs. You liked plain coffee and chipped mugs and numbers you could defend. I want you to know what we said about you today wasn't PR, it was inventory. You fed us more than food. You gave us more than rooms with doors. You gave us back a future tense. I read your notebooks. I traced the ink where your hand shook. I saw the margins where you thought you were failing and kept going anyway. I wish you'd written more about the days you doubted yourself. People think certainty is the engine. It isn't. Choice is. You taught me that. We kept the foundation, of course we did, but we also changed it. We added artist grants in your name because you loved Noah's wild colors and because kids keep showing up with talent too big for their wallet. We started a pantry where the fridge isn't locked. We put books in the lobby that you would argue with out loud, and I can hear you in my head, fighting with the chapters you think are soft. There's a photograph on my desk of the three of us on the porch, Noah in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, me in your old flannel because I liked the weight of it, you with a sunburned nose and a grin that made strangers trust you. The day you took that photo, we grilled chicken and argued about whether to lease or buy the building. You pretended to be annoyed when we ganged up on you. You loved it. Can I say something you would scold me for? You were the parent I deserved. You were the ordinary miracle. No cape, just keys and casseroles and spreadsheets, and the kind of patience that doesn't need witnesses. I carry you like muscle memory. When a decision feels heavy, I ask, what serves people? When someone tries to buy my silence, I check the red file. When I doubt myself, I cook an omelet and remember that steady heat does more than flame. It's late now. The tea is cold. Noah turned over and mumbled my name in his sleep, like he did when he was small and monsters were under the bed instead of on letterhead. I slide a blanket over him and laugh quietly when he kicks it off. Outside, the street shines with fresh rain. Somewhere, a delivery truck rumbles. Life insists on continuing. If you're reading this, maybe you're where I used to be. Awake at a stupid hour, scrolling, looking for proof that it's worth choosing the people who don't share your last name. Here it is, proof we're standing. Not because blood saved us, but because someone's choice did. And now it's our turn. So here's my soft ask, whispered so it lands where it needs to. If this story found you, pass it along. Send it to the friend who doubts they deserve a second chance. Send it to the stranger you suspect is carrying a locked fridge kind of grief. Remind them that the door opens, the table has space. The night can be quiet again.